Hey everybody, this is Robb Ryerse, Dan Deitrich, and we are here on the Vote Common Good podcast. It is Monday. That means we're talking about politics. We're going to talk about the news of the day and some things that are happening and talk some politics. Dan, it's the day after Halloween. Does that explain why we are so late getting on the air today?
Partially,
were you
yeah.
out late last night, eating candy last night?
Late into the night, well past 7 p.m. Yeah, but really, we both have sick kids, which is a bummer. So we took the morning and afternoon off, and we're catching up now, coming to you with some politic action.
Yeah, I think that probably today would be the day that more kids stayed home from school than just about any other day, right? The Monday after Halloween, between the candy and being out in the cold after dark, it was just one of those days. But
Yep.
Your kids trick or treat? Did you have a good time?
We did. My daughter that's sick kind of did a few houses and then went back home, and me and the boys hit it pretty hard though. They had a real quota they were trying to reach, and yeah,
fantastic. We ran out of candy at our house after about an hour and a half or so. We had just a ton of kids, and so turned off the lights like you do to indicate that you're not participating any longer. And Vanessa and I were laying in bed watching some TV, and about 9 o'clock, our doorbell rang, and there were 4 kids out there. Trick-or-treating, and we were out of candy, so I had to go into my daughter's stash of candy and give these kids candy. And then as they were leaving, 4 more kids saw them leaving our house, and they came up, and so I was still handing out candy after it. So I don't think my daughter is probably watching the podcast now on Facebook or going to listen to it later. So she'll probably never know that I gave her candy away to other
redistributed
little kids.
her candy.
Exactly.
Like a classic socialist house.
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do, right? But hopefully, wherever you are in the world, you had a great Thanksgiving, great Halloween last night, and I'm glad to be back. I was away last week. I was on the We the People ride.
That's right.
Yeah, joined the team in South Texas, and was with the team through about half of Louisiana, and spent the week not on a bike, but instead I was driving one of the support vehicles. We've got an SUV pulling a trailer that every 10 miles or so stops and provides the riders with water and snacks and handles flat tires and anything else that comes up. And so I was doing that last week. Would drive 10 miles, sit and wait, and then have a flurry of activity, and then drive 10 miles and sit and wait. And it was a great time. Really enjoyed the opportunity to be a part of that. And if you want to know all about what's taking place right now, it's the We the People ride. It is happening at this point. It's a bike ride along the southern border to highlight the need for a common good immigration and border policy, and collecting stories and really having a much better understanding of what's taking place at our border, so that we can talk intelligently about it. And it's a really great effort. You can check it out at wethepeopleride.org and see all about that. If you'd like to jump in and participate, there's still time. It ends on November 14th. And in St. Augustine, Florida. Dan, are you headed back to finish the ride?
I don't know yet.
And be there at the end?
I'd love to swoop in at the end and cross the finish line with everybody and take credit, but we'll see if it's in the cards or not.
Yeah. My wife, who was on the ride earlier in Texas and for a week and rode a bike, as opposed to me, who just drove a truck, she will be heading back for the final week and is looking forward to that. And so it's a really great thing. But that's not what we're here to talk about today, Dan. We're going to talk about some politics. And there is a lot going on in the world right now. There's an election tomorrow in Virginia, where Terry McAuliffe is trying to be elected again as governor of Virginia. Virginia's got this weird law that you can't serve 2 terms in a row. It's kind of a little workaround on term limits. So Terry McAuliffe, who was the previous governor of Virginia, is now running again and running against um, um, Glenn Youngkin, who is the Republican candidate, and this is a state that Joe Biden won by 10 points, and over the years has been trending solidly blue. But it looks like this election is if the polls are to be believed, is too close to call at this point. And there's kind of a mad dash right now to encourage people to get out and vote and to make sure they're voting for Terry McAuliffe so that Glenn Youngkin does not win and bring with him kind of the Trump approach to Republican politics. Though Glenn Youngkin has tried to distance himself from Donald Trump, not campaigning with him and not having Donald Trump come and do events in Virginia for him, which hopefully that indicates that there is some Trump fatigue setting in with the Republican Party. Fingers crossed. But the problem is, while there may be some personality differences between Glenn Youngkin and Donald Trump, there doesn't seem to be much policy difference between them, and that's a concern. Dan, you got any thoughts about the Virginia election?
Not much. I didn't realize that whole 4 years they get a new governor no matter what thing. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Yep. And it's, you can serve multiple terms, but you can't do them consecutively. Yeah. So, one of those weird things that Virginia does. It's a little bit different from some other states.
Virginia is a little different.
Yeah. Well, Virginia is for lovers. My I grew up in a family. My mom's name is Marilyn and my aunt's name is Virginia, and so my cousins always had these T-shirts that said Virginia is for lovers, but Maryland is for crabs. Just to kind of tweak my mom a little bit. So that's basically. My parents now live in Virginia, and no doubt are voting, and sadly will not be voting the way I would encourage them to. But that's how things go sometimes. Yeah. The other big news is taking place. Supreme Court today is hearing arguments about the Texas abortion law, and it's the major challenge to Roe v. Wade that is taking place, and it's kind of a scary thought that we could be headed backwards as a nation in terms of reproductive justice and women's right to healthcare being limited by this Texas law. Though the news reports today, I think all of us kind of expect that this, Trump-packed conservative court is going to uphold this Texas law. But it looks like the reports today is that Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, both, at least in the questioning, sounded like they're kind of skeptical about this Texas law. And so it's giving folks who believe in a woman's right to choose a little bit of hope that maybe just maybe we're going to be shocked to see Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett vote in an unexpected way on the merits of this absolutely ridiculous Texas law, which includes the provision. So what they tried to do is essentially what happens is when the Supreme Court rules that a law is unconstitutional, it essentially eliminates the ability of the government to enforce that law. So the workaround that Texas added to this law was this mechanism for reporting someone of getting an abortion being through civil courts rather than criminal courts, and this $10,000 bounty on the head of a woman who gets an abortion, and that's kind of their workaround. So they, if the court rules this unconstitutional, they say, well, listen, the court can't rule this unconstitutional because it's not enforced by law enforcement. And it seems like Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett are not finding that a compelling argument. And so fingers crossed that they vote the right way on this. I think we're all going to probably be waiting on pins and needles and finding out how this goes. But it's crazy times we live in, Dan.
Yeah, just the the idea of a bounty and like vigilante justice, like that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Just crazy to me.
Yeah, and we're also still on Joe Manchin watch. Um, is Joe Manchin going to put the good of the country ahead of himself?
Can't look away.
Yeah, we're still waiting to see if Joe Manchin will back the president's Build Back Better agenda and the spending bill. And again, as we've talked about in the past, this is all tied up. There's an infrastructure bill that progressives in the House are saying, listen, we don't want to, we're all in favor of the infrastructure bill, but we don't want to pass that without the guarantee that we're also going to have the chance to vote on the Build Back Better agenda, which includes all sorts of things like money to combat climate change and universal pre-K and extending the child tax credit. There's all sorts of things. And Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, Republican or see, I was going to say Democrats, but I actually said Republican because that's how they've been acting, have been holding these bills hostage. A couple of things have been interesting. Ro Khanna, who is a congressman from California, one of the most progressive members of the House of Representatives, one of the original Justice Democrats, if that means anything to anybody, just to kind of put him on the spectrum of where he lands. That's the same organization, one of the organizations that is supported and endorsed AOC and Ilhan Omar and Anion Presley. There's like this, Ro Khanna is a part of that group, and he indicated yesterday that he's willing to vote on the infrastructure bill and kind of decouple it from the Build Back Better agenda, which is kind of out of step with where the Progressive Caucus has been. It's just a super frustrating thing here where we've got progressives in the House who want to move forward with two really important bills that will make a big difference in the country, that will address really needed things in terms of infrastructure and really positive kind of climate and social change. And you've got Joe Manchin dragging his feet and Kristen Sinema dragging her feet and making that difficult. And so we continue to wonder, is this going to happen? When's it going to happen? And it's super frustrating because every day that it doesn't happen, every day that this internal gridlock continues for the Democrats, as we get day after day after day closer to the midterm elections, it communicates that Democrats don't know how to govern. They don't know how to lead. They can't get their agenda passed.
Yeah.
And President Biden is ineffective as a leader, and it's really, really frustrating.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw this, but there's a group of students doing a hunger strike, and they confronted Joe Manchin. So these kids are like literally going hungry for days. They're outside his office begging him to do something about climate change.
Yeah.
And he just kind of, pushes him off like, oh, make an appointment with my office. And they're like, yeah, your office won't talk to us. We're talking to you now. Why won't you do anything about this?
Yeah. It's, it's got to be so frustrating for folks who, really went in hard with the blue wave and believe strongly that, if we stop Donald Trump, it wasn't just about stopping, the negative force that Donald Trump was. That was tremendously important, but also electing a Democrat president and then Democrats having control of both the House and the Senate, even if they're tight margins, and they are, that gives the opportunity for Democrats to lead and to enact some of their agenda. And it's this really frustrating thing of like, elections have consequences. And, if somebody wins, it means, that they ought to have some opportunity to implement their agenda. And it's not, certainly Republicans have been stymieing that using the filibuster.
Mm-hmm.
And, Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema have been unwilling to abolish the filibuster. They've been unwilling to move forward on the Build Back Better agenda. And, it is just really, really frustrating for folks saying, wait a minute, we won these elections. What is the problem here?
Yeah. Well, the frustrations don't end with Joe Manchin. Unfortunately, they go right to Joe Biden as well, and that's kind of our main topic today. Is Joe Biden made some big promises during the campaign, and a lot of people put their weight behind him to get him elected, and it's kind of easing back from some of those promises, specifically around student loans. Tell us a little
Yeah.
bit about that.
Yeah, I've been thinking for a few weeks now about kind of drawing an analogy between Joe Biden and George H.W. Bush. I fear that there are parallels that are going to happen um, between these two presidencies, these two administrations. And listen, I campaigned hard for Joe Biden. I was a part of the Vote Common Good tour that traveled the country, putting on events and urging people of faith to support Joe Biden. I published a couple of op-eds through Time magazine to encourage both Republicans and evangelicals and even pro-life people to vote for Joe Biden. I have, without hesitation, and without any sense of oh, I wouldn't say no qualms, because frankly,
Got
Joe Biden's
several
not nearly,
qualms, but
yeah, Joe Biden's not nearly progressive enough for me. But I was 100% behind Joe Biden, supporting his candidacy for president, and have really rooted for him throughout the beginning of his first term. And frankly, I'm a little bit worried. I'm a little bit concerned, and I wanted to draw today a couple of parallels that I think exist between what happened back in 1988 and what is happening now. What happened in terms of George H.W. Bush's reelection and how things played out. And I see history repeating itself right now with the Biden administration, and it's a real concern for me. So maybe to set the table a little bit. So back in 1988, George Bush was running for the presidency. He was the vice president. This is after 2 terms of Ronald Reagan. And he made a very clear promise, a very straightforward promise as a part of his campaign. And certainly, candidates always make campaign promises and political promises. We're used to that. But this was unequivocal and clear. He said what he would do and what he would not do. And he could not have been more crystal clear about it. Dan, let's play that video for folks so they can hear what took place back in 1988. This is the Republican convention nominating George H.W. Bush for president. This was his acceptance speech, and this is what he said.
And I'm the one who will not raise taxes. My opponent now says he'll raise them as a last resort or a third resort. But when a politician talks like that, that's one resort he'll be checking into. And my opponent won't rule out raising taxes, but I will, and the Congress will push me to raise taxes, and I'll say no. And they'll push, and I'll say no. And they'll push again, and I'll say to them, read my lips. No new taxes.
And there is that famous statement from George H.W. Bush, read my lips, no new taxes. That was
people
1988.
loved that. They were going wild.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very clear, crystal clear promise. Congress is going to push, and I'll say no. Congress is going to push again. I'll say no. They're going to push again. And I'll say, read my lips, no new taxes. That's 1988. Well, in June of 1990, the Bush administration put out a statement that said, it's clear to me that both sides of the deficit problem and the need for a package that can be enacted require all of the following: entitlement and mandatory program reform, tax revenue increases, growth incentives, discretionary spending reductions, orderly reductions in defense expenditures, and budget process reform. Now, the little phrase that's in there that is tremendously important is that little phrase, tax revenue increases. And they tried to spin it that like, well, no, this isn't a tax increase. This is a revenue increase. But the reality is that in November of 1990, George Bush signed the omnibus budget reconciliation bill that raised taxes, raised the maximum tax rate from 28 to 31%, raised the alternative minimum tax from 21 to 24%. And he very clearly and very loudly and very obviously reneged on his campaign promise to not raise taxes. He clearly said, read my lips, no new taxes. And then he raised taxes. And as a result of that, Republicans lost seats in the midterms. They lost seats in the House. They lost seats in the Senate in the 1990 midterms. Then the Gulf War happened, and Bush's approval ratings in 1991 went up to 89% approval ratings, which is absolutely insane. And you think, okay, like a president with an 89% approval rate is going to win re-election easily. Come on, like that's a piece of cake. And then Bill Clinton reminded the world that George H.W. Bush lied and broke his promise, and Clinton campaigned on it hard. We've even got one of Clinton's campaign ads from 1992. Go ahead and play that for us, Dan.
1988.
Read my lips. No new taxes.
Then George Bush signed the second biggest tax increase in American history.
Read my lips.
George Bush increased taxes on the middle class. Bush doubled the beer tax and increased the gas tax by 56%. Now George Bush wants to give a $108,000 tax break to millionaires. $108,000. Guess who's going to pay? We can't afford 4 more years.
So just kind of tracking this, very clear promise, read my lips, no new taxes. Then he raised taxes. And listen, we could debate, we could argue like whether that was necessary, whether those revenue increases,
Right,
quote unquote, were necessary. Maybe they were. I would probably argue that they were. The Gulf War happens, his approval rates skyrocket, and then the American public gets reminded in the election of 1992 that he flat out lied to them about a very clear promise that he made. And many, many people point to that broken promise as the reason why he lost. So let me give you a couple of examples. Conservative talk show host Rush Limbaugh, who at that point, in time was so tremendously popular, said in his book, See, I Told You So, that Bush would have easily won re-election if he hadn't raised taxes. There's a Republican pollster who called his promise the 6 most destructive words in the history of presidential politics. Read my lips, no new taxes. The 6 most destructive words in presidential politics. Ed Rollins, who's a Republican political activist, said probably is the most serious violation of any political pledge anyone has ever made. Marlon Fitzwater, who was Bush's press secretary, called the reversal the single biggest mistake of this administration. And the reason why it was such a problem was because conservatives those voters on the right, diehard conservatives, who were all in for Ronald Reagan, didn't really trust George Bush. They didn't see him as a true conservative. They didn't see him as one of their own. They saw him as someone who was saying these things but didn't really believe them. they harbored this distrust of him. They voted for him because they thought he was a better choice in 1998 than Michael Dukakis, but they kind of held their nose doing it, and then breaking that tax pledge created this wedge where conservatives weren't going to support him. It opened the door for Ross Perot to jump into the race, and Bill Clinton running in kind of this triangulation way. And it was enough that, made it so that George H.W. Bush, who enjoyed an 89% approval rating a year before, lost re-election simply because he broke a very clear promise that he made.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my fear is that history is going to repeat itself. This is one of those things that you look at this and you go, okay, the lesson from this is if you make a very clear campaign promise, you better keep it, right? If you don't, it can come back to bite you, and do it in a really horrendous way.
Mm-hmm.
And even your biggest successes won't be enough to overcome a very clear broken promise. And this leads us to Joe Biden and my fear that history is repeating itself, where Joe Biden pledged on the campaign trail multiple times that he was going to address the student debt problem that we have in our country, the student debt crisis that we have, by eliminating at least $10,000 in student debt. And this is Joe Biden's words, immediately. Immediately. And just so you know that I'm not making this up, let's go ahead and hear Joe Biden talking about this.
There is talk of debt relief. There's bailing out of businesses, which is a good thing to do. What about the students? Is now a time to forgive student debt and then restructure how we pay for college so we're not here again in 10 years?
The answer is yes. That's why I proposed and the House, Nancy, put it in the plan to immediately provide $10,000 in debt relief as stimulus right now for students, a minimum of $10,000 relief. I've also proposed that you, in fact, have, if you come from a family where you are making less than $125,000 a year, the family, that you, in fact, are able to go to a state university for free. And you get debt relief for those who've gone to those universities in the last 5 years. Also, we got to make sure that we deal with the notion that people, in fact, look, I was asked to do a study when I was vice president. What are the jobs of the future? Right now, 6 in 10 jobs require something more than a high school degree. It should be, whether it's an apprenticeship or a community college or a state university, it should be free, number one. If you make less than 50 grand, then you have a thing called Pell Grants. We should double the Pell Grants from $7,000 a year to $14,000 a year. So people can have the tuition. A lot of people, you give them the tuition, they still can't pay for the room, the board, the books, and, the transportation and the like. And so it just makes sense that we do that because everybody's better off.
Oh, that was a loud ending.
So there's a little clip from the Stephen Colbert show where Joe Biden very clearly says going to eliminate at least $10,000 in student debt immediately. And there were other times at the point of the campaign that I don't think he personally said it, but people on his behalf talked about eliminating $50,000 in student loans. And I see Ann in the comments, pointing that out, that's actually what we need. Now, Joe Biden has made a very clear promise that he was going to address student debt relief immediately. And we are now well into his first term, and he's not kept that promise. Now, maybe you're saying, okay, well, listen, is the problem Congress, right? Is the problem Congress? Maybe Joe Biden can't do this on his own. He needs Nancy Pelosi. He needs Chuck Schumer he needs Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, because we can totally rely on them. he needs them to pass some law. And certainly that's one way to do it, but that's not the only way that student loan debt can be addressed. Apparently within the law, there is the laws that are currently on the books gives the president the authority to, with the stroke of his pen, to eliminate student loan debt. Like he's got the ability to do that through, the Treasury Secretary, through the Education Secretary. Like that actually exists. That ability to eliminate this debt already exists. It does not require a law passed by Congress, because the law already passed by Congress stipulates that the president has this authority. There apparently has been a memo that's been written about this, outlining it, and progressives are now pushing Joe Biden to release the details of this memo, showing that he has this authority. Ilhan Omar, Congresswoman from Minneapolis, Minnesota, our very own Doug Padgett's our fearless leader, his congresswoman, has been pushing the Biden administration to release this memo saying, hey, you've got the authority to do this and you're not doing it. This isn't going to take any Republican support. It doesn't cost a filibuster fight. We don't need to get Joe Manchin on board or Kristen Sinema on board. You could actually just do this. You've already got this authority. And the Biden administration knows this. This memo has been written. And Ilhan Omar and progressives in the House are pushing the administration to release that memo to justify moving on this and keeping his promise. And the administration has been resisting that.
Yeah, so they're like, what gives? Why are you not moving on this thing that you said clearly you were going to do?
And to make things even worse, the Biden administration is moving forward with restarting student loan payments. They want to begin collecting again on student loans. Throughout the pandemic, because of COVID, student loan payments have been put on hold to provide some financial relief for people affected by the pandemic. And now the Biden administration, which could continue to keep those payments on hold, is instead deciding to, figure out a way that they can restart those. And it's one of these things that is, absolutely going to, first of all, it's going to make life much, much harder for families that have student loan debt to be able to, have these payments restart in the midst of a really, still recovering economy. It's going to take money that could be pumped into the economy in other ways. It's going to, divert that from economic growth into these loan repayments. And then there's the political optics of it, of, here's this candidate who promised to address this issue, and instead he's kind of going the other way. He's not just not forgiving money. He's also going to, push that now we have to begin to repay it as well. It is, it's something that is just not going to play well at all within Democratic and progressive circles. And that promise of, that promise about free community college. Yeah, that, is getting axed from the spending plans as well.
Yeah.
As these debates over, how much are we going to spend, and Joe Manchin doesn't want us to spend that much. One of the things that Joe Biden has been willing to cut from the plan to make deals with Democrats within his own, within his own party, has been, that willingness to have free community college, backing off on that very clear promise. So not only is he not forgiving the student loans, not only is he, restarting student loan payments, he's also now not going to deliver on the free community college. It's just one thing after another. It's
almost like he wasn't serious about it.
And this is the problem. And this is where the parallel comes. The problem is here is that progressives, and there's a huge progressive wing within the Democratic Party, the Bernie Sanders, the quote unquote Bernie Sanders wing, the Elizabeth Warren wing of the party, is really pushing Joe Biden on this issue. And just like conservatives abandoned George H.W. Bush because he did not keep his promise about taxes, they abandoned him and he lost re-election as a result of that. My fear, my very real fear, is that progressives are going to abandon Joe Biden. They never really trusted him to begin with. He was not Elizabeth Warren. He was not Bernie Sanders. He was not like a longtime, well-known progressive politician. He was, the establishment guy, just like George H.W. Bush was. Conservatives didn't trust him. They saw him as an establishment guy. When push came to shove, he broke his promise. I really fear that what's going to happen is that this is going to be painted as Joe Biden pandering to progressives to get elected and then backing out on the promise, not keeping the promise. And as a result, progressives are going to abandon him, and that's going to cost him re-election. Or if he doesn't run again, it's going to cost Kamala Harris her election in 2024. And I certainly think that it's going to cost Democrats seats in the House and seats in the Senate, just like it did Republicans in 1990. Dan, I see history repeating itself here, and I'm a little bit terrified about it. And it seems like a completely, like in tennis, they've got this term, an unforced error. This feels like an unforced error to me. This feels like this is a promise that could be kept. And Joe Biden, for some inexplicable reason, is not keeping it. And I think it's going to cost the Democratic Party. Dan, tell me I'm wrong here.
I wish you were wrong, but it just seems like he had to have had people do the math ahead of this whole thing to know what it would cost to forgive these student loans. And so that political calculation was made years ago, probably. And so to decide now that he doesn't want to do it and to backtrack, not just on the immediate forgiveness of student loans at a $10,000 level or a $50,000 level, but to backtrack on any of the other stuff he promised to, these tuition-free state colleges. And I don't understand the political calculation here. Who is he trying to win over with this other than maybe Joe Manchin? He's not going to win over Republicans, so I don't know why you're trying there. It just seems like he's sacrificing a lot for no real gain.
Yeah. That's how I see it too. It's just so you don't think, well, it's just progressives that are pushing on him. Chuck Schumer, who is no hero of the progressive movement within the Democratic Party. And listen, we just put aside all the stupid Republican talking points about how all Democrats are socialists, and it's not the case. Democratic Party has a wide spectrum of approaches when it comes to economics and spending, and there are establishment Democrats who are status quo, nothing will fundamentally change kind of people, and then you've got progressives that are pushing for substantive change, structural change, as Elizabeth Warren talked about, and Chuck Schumer is an establishment Democrat. He's not a progressive Democrat. He's not. But every day or every couple of days, he tweets, today would be a great day for Joe Biden to forgive student loan debt. This is a winning issue. This is an issue that would make a huge difference in the lives of students. And the Democratic base is made up of young people who care about the climate, they care about healthcare, they care about student loans, and so much of the energy that happens in the Democratic Party comes from students and young people, and this is something that will absolutely demoralize them. This could make a huge difference and motivate them to be supportive. You think about families, middle income, middle class families with, parents with student debt that they've taken on for their kids, parents that are worried about their children. This is a winning political issue. This is one of those things that the conservatives are going to, scream and yell about it, but they're going to scream and yell about anything you do.
Yeah.
This is a winning issue that you clearly promised you would address immediately.
Yeah.
And here we are still waiting.
And it's
I
not,
think,
yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's not just the immediate benefits of, families not having these student loans. It's the broader economic benefits. These people are going to use that extra money each month, and it's going to go back into the economy. It's going to stimulate the economy. They're going to buy cars. They're going to buy appliances. They're going to pay for things they've been putting off because they couldn't afford it. And so it's not just a benefit to the people that will have loans forgiven. It's a benefit to the people that have small businesses and will see their businesses thrive because of it.
And maybe we could say, okay, listen, Joe Biden will be able to overcome this. And in 2024, if he's running against Donald Trump, or he's running against Ron DeSantis, or he's running against Nikki Haley, or whoever he's running against on the Republican side, he'll be able to overcome this. He will have beaten COVID, and he'll be super popular because of that. He will have, revived the economy, and he'll be super, super popular because of that. Maybe eventually an infrastructure bill will get passed, and, he'll get a bump in approval ratings because of that. Listen, George H.W. Bush had an 89% approval rating because of the Gulf War, less than a year before the election. And that was not enough to overcome not keeping a simple promise that he made. And Joe Biden, if you're listening, do you listen to our podcast? Mr. President, please keep your promise. Eliminate $10,000 in student debt. Eliminate $50,000 in student debt. Don't restart these payments. Keep your promise about free community college, and move forward in a way that will make a difference in the lives of so many Americans.
Yeah.
You can do it. Please do it. You said you would do it. Please do it. It feels to me like the future of the country, and I don't want to be like overly dramatic or not, but it feels to me in so many ways that the future of the country is dependent on Joe Biden keeping this promise. And I am beflummoxed about why he hasn't.
And it'd be different if he was like crushing it on climate change and making strides on immigration reform. But that's all stalled out too. So it's like, what do progressives have to look forward to here?
Yeah. Yeah. I wish the Vote Common Good politics podcast today was all happy and cheery and everything is great and going in the right direction. The reality is that I feel like we need to amp up the pressure on the Biden administration to keep this promise. And it's gonna make a huge difference in the election, not just the midterms coming up in 2022, but the presidential election in 2024. Keeping this promise is absolutely fundamental to keeping the momentum, keeping the enthusiasm. I say all the time that the most important thing when it comes to a candidate is voter enthusiasm. And listen, progressives weren't enthusiastic about Joe Biden to begin with. If he does not keep this promise, they're going to be not just unenthusiastic, they're going to be completely demoralized. He won't have their support in 2024. And that is only good news for Trump or DeSantis or Haley or whoever it is on the Republican side. And, it's concerning to me.
Yeah. Very concerning. Midterms are usually bad for those in power, and so it could be very bad if turnout isn't great.
Yeah. So all of this is to say that we need the president to keep his promise. We need the president to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time, and handle multiple things at once, and to do this. And we as his supporters need to keep the pressure on, because it feels in so many ways that the future of the country is dependent on these elections. Elections matter; they have consequences, and we saw that with Donald Trump, and his complete incompetence, which is contributed to 700,000 Americans losing their lives.
Yeah.
And we have got to make sure that this same that version of Republican politics doesn't get elected to the presidency again. And, that's going to take Joe Biden keeping his promises. And we've got to keep the pressure on to make sure that he does that.
Yeah.
And,
Lori says in the chat, President Biden must be overloaded with the cleanup from the last administration. I agree. He's got a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you're president of the United States, I think you've got to be able to handle multiple things at once.
Yeah.
And you've got to have a team that can do this. And this is one of those things that you were very clear on. And it's concerning. And Anthony in the comments, I don't know if he's calling me a BS commentator. So Anthony's not on board with this idea. I don't know if that means that Anthony, supports Joe Biden and loves everything he does all the time, doesn't think this is a big deal, or maybe Anthony thinks, I'm a socialist, and and advocating for student loan forgiveness is some kind of socialist plot. All I know is that Joe Biden clearly made a promise, and we're waiting for him to keep it, and I really, really hope he does.
Yeah.
So listen, on that happy note, the Common Good podcast will be back tomorrow with the Faith team.
Yes. What day is it? Wednesday with
no.
Faith.
Tomorrow will be a report from the road with the We the People ride. And then on Wednesday, the Faith team will be here talking about important things. And we continue to encourage you all to be common do-gooders, people who are out there doing good in the world. And again, we just want to encourage Joe Biden to be a common do-gooder who forgives student loans like you promised to. Dan, great talking with you today.
As always.
Let's hope history doesn't repeat itself. Let's hope that Joe Biden keeps his promises.
Yeah.
And things go in the right direction.
Yeah. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate it. We'll talk with you again.